So the new Space Jam movie came out. Um, there are some questions over whether it should even exist in the first place, but I won't get into that, at least not right now. Um, because unexpectedly, first of all, the original Space Jam came to 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray. Now, I had already bought this on standard Blu-ray and it was fairly cheap, like in the $5 bin at Walmart. And I don't always upgrade everything, but I figured this movie was so visually impressive that maybe it'd be worth it, and it was. If you're wondering whether this beautiful sheen, high resolution, high contrast slipcover is any indication of the movie itself's image quality, yes it is. The entire thing was mastered on film, so that film master was just newly scanned in 4K. But it's important to keep in mind that there were various elements that made up this film. First, there was pure live-action 35mm film footage. And of course, this looks great in 4K. Especially when there's good lighting and the subjects are in focus, the detail is astounding. Especially when watching on a big screen like a projector. This was made in 1996, the year after the first completely computer-animated movie, but it did have a lot of early computer animation in it. And of course with HDR, these colors, and there's a lot of bright colors in this movie, they really pop. And some of the crowd footage in this movie at one of the games early on appears to be candid shots of real sports crowds. So to see these in sharp 4K from the 90s is kind of surreal because so much footage, especially realistic footage from back then, was on videotape. And then besides the computer animation, of course, there's a lot of hand-drawn animation. But again, it's important to remember that this is not completely the way they used to do it. They didn't have the same completely optical pipeline that they had before computers. While most films of that time weren't yet digitally mastered, as in editing done on the computer, they would take CGI animation from the computer and print it out to film, and that would be combined, edited, often the old-fashioned way, with the film elements. And as for the hand-drawn animation, for a while there, up until the early 90s, it was done the old-fashioned way. But starting in that decade, the CAPS system started to be used. CAPS, C-A-P-S, would be used after they scanned the rough hand-drawn animation into the computer. They would use digital ink and paint to fill the colors in, and this gave a much more bright, clean look to hand-drawn animation than the old-fashioned way. And it also gave the option to add shading, so that's something else that you started to see a lot in this time period, these shadows on hand-drawn animation that normally wouldn't happen. And in this case with Space Jam, they actually made manually drawn tone maps, which were dark gradients, which would indicate where the shadows would be. They scanned those into the computer and combined them. So that actually was a lot more work than nowadays, where it would be automatic, more so. And after the animation was scanned in, they also used the computer to create a sense of parallax, or the shifting planes, to give movement and angular depth to a scene. So, because this early CGI and this hand-drawn animation had a bottleneck of part of the pipeline being on an old computer, old by nowadays standards, that means that resolution of those elements is necessarily limited. Even nowadays, most CGI in movies maxes out at 2K, or 1080p roughly, because it just takes too long to render. But back then, the top resolution was even lower. So the animation definitely has a softer appearance than the live action footage in the movie does. And in a number of cases, you can actually see the pixels. But because it was part of this overall optical process, it kind of enhanced the resolution virtually by being blurred out and then resharpened, in a sense. So you're getting the cleanest possible transfer of this from this new 4K transfer. So anyway, in between the two Space Jam movies, I rewatched Looney Tunes Back in Action. This was their 2003 movie. It wasn't as successful as they'd hoped to be commercially, but critically it was. It was a pretty good movie. Now, due to the time period this was made in, I'm not sure if actually this could have as good a transfer as Space Jam, because I'm guessing it was all digitally mastered in 2003. So if they ever did do a 4K, which I doubt they will, um, it would just be probably an upconvert with HDR grading. Oh, and by the way, they did have a cameo, which appears to be some repurposed footage of Michael Jordan. So anyway, moving on to Space Jam: A New Legacy. As for the first Space Jam, some people love it, some people maybe hate it, but I loved it. I thought it was so wild, so out there, so outside of the box that it was so much fun. All the characters felt like themselves. Had a lot of good comedic writing for Bill Murray and even the other NBA stars. They did a lot of funny acting that you wouldn't expect. And besides, like I said, it was a visual treat from beginning to end. And the new Blu-ray also has a power-packed sound mix. Had to turn it down a few times. Didn't want to disturb the neighbors, but it was awesome. Very enveloping. And the new one is good from a technical perspective. It's pixel perfect. I can't find fault with the technical quality of the animation or anything else in its construction. Was it a fun time? Sure. It's a fun time to pass the afternoon. And if you're interested in the franchise as a whole, of course. But it really shouldn't exist. In fact, the very idea for it is sort of not even acknowledging that this is Looney Tunes. It's trying to make this sub-franchise out of Space Jam, which is impossible. It's such a specific concept of cartoon characters playing a basketball game, that to stretch it even for one further movie is absurd. They did make up a new spin on it, not outer space, but cyberspace. I deduced that. They weren't even smart enough to say that. I'm telling you. That's the only way you can justify calling it Space Jam, by saying it's cyberspace, but they never even said that during the movie. But they really could have taken this and made it much more original. And like so many things today, it's based on nostalgia. This is a serious problem in movies nowadays. It's not just based on nostalgia, it's completely built and resting on it with nothing else. From the opening scene, which is a flashback, to the opening credits, which are the same construction, but without any of the hard originality of the original. I would have much preferred, there were some nice elements in the story, but I would have much preferred they took this in a completely different direction and used those elements, but had a different backdrop to it. Because honestly, from the very beginning, the basketball subplot just felt shoehorned in. Like it just had to be there to make it this sequel for the 90s kids, and no other logic beyond that. Some people might have a problem with the completely computer animated Looney Tunes characters they see in the commercials, but I have to say I don't have a problem with that. Let me tell you why. First of all, that's a relatively small portion of the movie. In most of the movie, you'll be pleased to know that they're actually in their hand-drawn forms, and I was pleasantly surprised with this. So that was nice to see. And it's only at that final finale, that the basketball game at the end, when they get upgraded to those CGI versions. And this isn't the first time that they've been seen that way. Looney Tunes has made shorts over the years since the originals, and the most recent theatrical shorts have been in this high-quality CGI version. Some of those shorts have also been in stereoscopic 3D. One of them is a Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner short called Fur of Flying, and it's kind of secretly an extra on this movie, Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole, and that's an extra on there. You can see that Looney Tunes Roadrunner short in 3D, and it looks great. If you want to buy this, it's in the link below. So yeah, while it was done visually perfect, I can't give too much props to the artistic design of it, because I think there's a misunderstanding that if you just throw so much at the wall that uh, that's that's excellence. But no, there was just so many details, so much frenetic design of these secondary characters and the movements and the actions. I wouldn't say it's overwhelming. I'd just say it's superfluous, because I'm okay with lots of detail if it serves a purpose and if it makes sense and if it's not trying to mask something else or to distract from a lack of substance. And that's exactly what was done with the animation design on this. And going back to the original movie, it looks so much better, even though it was made in this uh, cutting edge of this green screen and tracking technology, bleeding edge, really. This was way before a lot of other movies started doing this stuff. And even where there is slight tracking inconsistencies, it just looks and feels so much better. I also think it's kind of insane that they cut the Pepe Le Pew scene, character, in fact. And it reminded me of a scene from this movie. Porky says, "It's a pain in the butt being politically correct." Yeah, how ironic. Some people might have a problem with the Warner Brothers product placement, or the use of their intellectual property, rather. But I actually thought that was kind of a cool concept, and it's not like it's the first time. If you go right back to the original, um, Daffy Duck shows the WB stamp on his bottom. He kisses it. um, and Looney Tunes Back in Action took this even further. It took place on the Warner Brothers studio lot. There's a whole scene with Daffy Duck stealing the Batmobile. Batman makes an appearance. Uh, Scooby-Doo and the gang make an appearance. And other WB properties as well, but including lots of other pop culture references that aren't even related to WB or owned by them. And really, go back to the old Looney Tunes cartoons. This is the way it's always been. So that, and actually, in this context of this virtual computer world, which was a cool idea, I think what better way could you do it than to have it be a Warner Brothers server? And that's what it is in A New Legacy. You've got these different planets for different Warner Brothers franchises, and part of the plot of the movie is to go around and collect the characters from them. Yeah, so anyway, that's all I got to say. See you later.